All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Jocelyn Folk. I'm here with Jess Cohen. We are two of the student team members from the MIT Renewable Energy Siting Clinic, and we're here to record our presentation regarding our work in partnership with the Cape Ann Climate Coalition this spring. First, I just want to acknowledge that we have a whole team of students, not all of whom could join for this recording, but who all contributed significantly to this project. And that included Eduardo Rosario, Ava Ten, Misha Shahid, Sophia Chiapero, Ross Phillips, and Nikita Kulkarni, along with Jess and I, who are here with you for this recording. For our agenda here, we're going to talk about the background and context of this project. We're going to talk about the findings in this project, and then we will leave you with our conclusions, including some of our key findings regarded to content and regarded to what worked in the process, as well as recommendations and next steps. Okay, so let's launch into the background and context. We conducted our project over the course of about 8 weeks this spring. We started in March working with the Cape Ann Climate Coalition. We were able to conduct 2 roundtable meetings, the first on April 8th, the second on May 1st. Additionally, during that same timeframe from April through early May, we conducted a number of one-to-one stakeholder interviews. And we are now submitting our final report and recording this presentation to go along with it. Throughout that process, our key objectives have been 4. First, we wanted to identify key stakeholders in the Gloucester community. Second, we wanted to assess viewpoints of those stakeholders towards solar energy. We also wanted to support the community in broadening the group of stakeholders that are participating in this kind of process, as well as supporting the CACC and the town of Gloucester with strengthening its engagement toolkit to better support conversations that will happen in the future. So this project was really focused on Gloucester specifically. Gloucester is a really beautiful town that is on the southern shore of Cape Ann, about 30 miles northeast of Boston. It has a strong tradition of fishing. It also has a summer tourism industry that is a strong industry in the community. And currently, Gloucester offsets about 70% of its municipal electricity demand with wind turbines. That means that there is not a large amount of municipal electricity demand to still be met by solar, but there are other needs, including commercial and residential power demand. We heard a lot from the community about how nature and historic preservation are valued. And we also know that as a coastal New England town, many of the residents are very concerned about climate change and the risks that climate change brings, as well as how to make the town more resilient. So I want to talk to you about our first roundtable meeting. This was our first real engagement with the community in Gloucester, and our goal was to introduce ourselves as well as to uncover stakeholder opinions around how they're feeling about energy in general in the community, the grid and resiliency, what role they think Gloucester should have in producing its own energy, as well as their thoughts on types of solar technology and siting it or where solar energy could go in the community. So on April 8th, we took a trip up to Gloucester. We were welcomed into the very beautiful City Hall, and we had a roundtable meeting that was open to the public and hosted in partnership with the Cape Ann Climate Coalition. All right, so in the community roundtable, we did a couple of things. We wanted to prioritize conversation at the tables. And so we, one moment, I'm actually going to shift over to slideshow. That's probably better. Okay. We provided a brief informational presentation, really with the purpose of providing a common vocabulary to all of the stakeholders present in the meeting. That was focused around different types of solar energy. And so here's just an image from that presentation. You can see here an example of a ground-mounted solar, as well as some of the different use cases or the ways solar energy could be deployed in Gloucester to support municipal use or resilience or potentially making Gloucester even a community that produces energy for sale to other communities, or even a community solar project. And these are not mutually exclusive use cases, but they are some of the ways you can think about using solar energy. I want to mention here that the Meester report, which was done in 2015, a report commissioned in 2015 by the city of Gloucester to look for sites that could be used with solar development in the community. We used that report and we used it as a reference point for identifying sites that could be used for these types of solar installations. And then we wanted to ask, and in the community, in the roundtable discussions, questions that helped us understand how the stakeholders are feeling about energy and solar in their community. So we asked questions like, what role should Cape Ann have in generating its own electricity, or at least contributing to energy production? We, in all of our roundtable meetings, we used visual materials to support these conversations, and we found that really seeing examples of these types of solar installations helped spur that conversation and make it a rich conversation among the community members. So these are some images of the visuals that were on the tables. This was illustrating different types of solar installations, so something that's a larger, more utility scale, municipal rooftop, parking lot canopy solar, and even floating solar, which we realized a little bit later actually is not a possibility for Gloucester. There was some interest among community members in understanding this more, but we realized later that the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection does not allow this on drinking water reservoirs. So that's really not going to be an option in Gloucester, unfortunately. We provided stakeholders with this map, and again, the sites that are identified and shown in these purple triangles are from the Meester report, and these are sites that were identified as having, some possibility for solar development in the future. And before I hand it over to Jess, I just want to share a couple of methodology notes. We really found that some practices in the roundtable meetings worked very effectively to stimulate great conversation. So first, there was the use of the visuals, which really gave people a sense of really what does this look like? What could it look like in our community? We also kept the informational presentations brief. In other words, this was not a lecture. This was a very brief presentation followed by a lot of really rich conversation at the tables. And we just prioritized that small group conversation and made sure that that was the primary focus of the session. Okay, I'm going to pass it. Oh, before I pass it to Jess, I'm going to tell you about our one-to-one stakeholder interviews. So again, sort of in between these two roundtable meetings, we conducted stakeholder interviews. And again, our goal was to get in touch with stakeholders in Gloucester, as well as to assess their opinions and their points of view related to these issues. So our methods for this were that our partners at the Cape Ann Climate Coalition identified about 120 stakeholders for us. We reached out to the majority of them. We reached out to about 85, and we were able to actually complete 23 interviews. So I think it's between 25 to 30% of the people we reached out to agreed to be interviewed. There were a number of folks who did not respond. Obviously, we're asking for people's time, so we understood that. And those interviews were conducted either via phone or a Zoom call. And we did prepare a set of standardized questions that we asked every interviewee, as well as questions that could be more adapted to that person's affiliations and interests.
Yeah, thank you, Jocelyn. So I'll take over and start talking about Community Roundtable 2. With this one, we kind of narrowed down a little bit and sort of created a little more structure with 5 scenarios to learn exactly what community priorities were related to solar development. And we talked about these 5 specific scenarios that included more qualitative information around different cost ranges, generally relative to one another, environmental impacts, how large or small these might be, and how and which Gloucester may benefit from these different scenarios. And sort of just generally trying to engage with them with some more specific ideas. And so the format of this community roundtable is sort of welcoming everyone in the same manner of the first roundtable, and giving like a short informational presentation and going through all the information so everyone's sort of on the same page, and having everyone react to the 5 different scenarios to get first impressions, seeing exactly what people felt were the draws of certain scenarios and then the drawbacks of other scenarios, and then voting. So labeling things like red, yellow, or green, red being how that they don't think that the scenario is a good fit for the community whatsoever. Yellow being this might be a good fit for our community depending on certain conditions, or feeling neutral about the option. Or green, would you feel that this is a great scenario for Gloucester? And then after that, sort of distilling back down exactly what led people to make these decisions. So what were the driving forces behind them liking or disliking a certain option, and then sort of closing out and sending everyone back home. Yeah, so these are some pictures from our second roundtable. And yeah, you can see we're giving the informational presentation on that picture on the right, and we have people sat at different round tables, which then went through each of the 5 scenarios. Yeah, so essentially, as I talked about before, we started with the informational presentation. You can see in the middle there our little diagram of what our descriptions around the cost or visual impact or how much generation or scale of the project might be. And then also talked about 4 different distinct use cases for the solar. So how can this be helpful to Gloucester? So in terms of resilience, creating a more robust energy system, reducing the municipal load on Gloucester, and also maybe perhaps providing Gloucester energy for the community and solar access for residents, as well as potentially being able to sell energy outside of their community as well. And so at each of the tables, we rated each scenario and then talked about why we rated each scenario. And then also discussed if you chose yellow or red for a certain scenario, what made you choose that, and what would have to change for you to move up a color. So if you were yellow, what conditions do you need met for this to turn into a green scenario for you? Yeah, and so this is just some examples of the materials that we handed out at the roundtable for people to base their decisions on. So these are scenarios 1 and 3. So ground-mounted solar, you can see we went through each of the different metrics and gave visual descriptions of what these might look like in each community. Yeah, so from there, we sort of started talking about the stakeholder interviews. So as Jocelyn mentioned, we held 23 of these, where we held one-to-one interviews, sort of getting getting directly from people what exactly they thought and how they felt about solar. So we found that there was like 3 main stakeholder groups that we were able to sort of reach. The largest one being nonprofit. Many of these nonprofit members were involved in organizations that were related to climate. And then also some people who are affiliated with government and also affiliated with business. So you can see that we have most of our interviews fell into those 3 buckets. From those interviews, we're able to distill some concerns and challenges across these interviews, what we found kept coming up and what people found most important. So the top 3 of these were sort of environmental impact. So how the land is being used is very important to the people in Gloucester, and making sure to keep sort of land that has use in terms of historical or environmental or like virgin, fresh land. That's really important to people in Gloucester to keep that way, essentially. The second highest mentioned concern was financial barriers, so worries about the costs of implementing something like this, who is going to fund it, who will end up having to pay for it, and also how can we get this into our community in an affordable way was a major concern for people as well. The third largest concern was around regulatory frameworks. So what exactly are the policies that are in place that allows or that advantages or disadvantages solar in this community? And also the fact that some people felt it was confusing around how solar may or may not be able to be implemented here in Gloucester as well. Similarly, we went through the stakeholder interviews and sort of aggregated what we felt were the top 10. Here you can see areas for opportunity and growth, how we can move forward in this issue. And so the most important one they found was people were really interested in collaboration. So with different entities sort of working together with one another, like corporations and experts and utilities, sort of making sure that all of these groups are on the same page and working together towards the same future. The second most highest priority was sort of expansion of solar. People want solar in their community. They do desire it. It's just a matter of how we're going to get it there. And then also in terms of energy reliability, Gloucester is looking to create a more robust system. And so battery storage solutions can help increase stability and durability along with solar. So that's something to keep in mind in terms of implementation in the future. People were also very interested. Oh, sorry.
Great, hold on.
People
There we go.
people were also very interested in looking at different kinds of sites to be used. So this kind of goes back to that concern from the last slide. People were very interested in using sites in sort of a dual use way. People mentioned unutilized space, such as parking lots or the tops of shopping malls, things that already exist already, and there's sort of space for us to put solar there while not hindering the original use of that space, essentially. Fifth most important one was sort of how local businesses are impacted. The localness of Gloucester is extremely important to that community. And so being able to ensure that these businesses are a part of the solution was something that was mentioned as well.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Jess, for walking us through all those findings. We want to, in this section, present to you our key findings about the stakeholder preferences. We're also going to share our key findings about process and some recommended next steps. So first, key findings about, the stakeholder interests. Number one, as Jess, I think, just spoke to, people really prefer dual usage of space for solar energy and especially unutilized spaces. So again, you just heard about rooftops, parking lot canopies, spaces that can be made as a dual use rather than taking green fields or other sort of natural spaces that have other value in the community. That was a very strong theme. Second, there was interest in looking at other sectors outside of municipal for solar growth. We talked at the very beginning of this presentation about how the majority of municipal electrical need is already being provided by the windmills. And so people were pretty interested in, residential usage or commercial usage or other usages. Number three, we were really struck that stakeholders do want growth in solar energy in Gloucester, and they're very comfortable with that growth being incremental. So openness to, adding small installations and sort of taking smaller steps toward increasing the renewable energy content in the community was something that people liked. There was not necessarily a push toward, hey, let's do some really big solar farm. It was more like, let's do smaller things and let's work with those sort of dual usage spaces. Number four, the aesthetics and the historical culture and the environment are all really strong priorities in Gloucester, and they are all interconnected. It is very important to people to preserve the aesthetics, the natural beauty of Gloucester, as well as the historical beauty of Gloucester. And so again, I think that connects back to number one with the idea that, we really want to do solar and we want to do it in places where it's going to be non-disruptive to the aesthetics and the culture. Number five, reliability and self-sufficiency is another priority. We did hear a number of concerns about the reliability of energy in the area. People were generally in favor of the idea of becoming more self-sufficient as a way of coping with that. And so, there's room to look at solar combined with storage and other options that could boost reliability and self-sufficiency. And then finally, number 6, again, very frequently we heard from stakeholders about the economic impact of energy, the high costs of energy in the area, the availability and reliability of that energy, and how that's impacting the economics of local businesses, as well as the challenges households face with the high cost of energy. And so the economic impact is very important to think through. And projects that can benefit the economics of the local community are going to be much more favorable. So we also just wanted to share some process takeaways, and these are some things that we learned in the process and want to pass on to future groups who might be undertaking similar processes. So first, while we made progress with securing engagement from a broader group of stakeholders, and there were people coming to the roundtable events who had not engaged before, we still think that there's a lot more work to do, and that is challenging work. And so we would recommend in a future project that there be some effort to take that roundtable format directly to a place where stakeholders might be. So that could be at a local high school to engage high school students. Maybe it could be at a local church to engage church members, but looking for an opportunity to bring that format to the stakeholders rather than asking them to come to, to where that meeting is. Number 2, there was a really strong desire for more information and education on renewable energy projects. And I think we frequently heard people asking for more detail on, well, what could this look like? How much would it cost? Like, how would that cost be allocated? How much energy could it provide? And so just a real hunger to get into more details. And so as plans start to emerge for potential solar development, that's a real opportunity to provide more of those details. Third, the roundtable format was very successful and provided a structured dialogue. We found that this really built some trust and engagement with the folks who participated. We got a lot of comments from participants that they really enjoyed it and found it very fruitful. We would recommend trying to continue this format rather than more of like a town hall format where people are sitting in rows of chairs and just listening, or one person's talking at a time. So, the roundtable format with discussion groups was pretty effective. Just as sort of an implementation note, if we're doing the roundtable format, we would suggest that there be both a facilitator and a note taker. We started out with the facilitator also taking notes, and we found that it's just hard to do both of those jobs simultaneously. We also learned that plans and methods need to be adaptable in the moment. So for example, in the first roundtable, we had a plan to sort of have people do one discussion and then get up and switch tables and go to another discussion group. And that actually didn't work in the moment for that group of folks. And so just being able to be adaptable in the moment to the needs of that particular stakeholder group is a good practice. And then finally, while we had about 8 weeks to complete this project and we were able to do quite a bit in that time, it really was kind of a sprint. And we would suggest that robust engagement processes just need a little bit more time. And so that's something for the clinic to think about as it's structuring its future projects. Definitely also something for community partners to think through and how to create a little bit more breathing room and a little bit more time for some of these process to unfold. Okay, and then finally, we are going to leave you with recommendations and next steps. We greatly enjoyed this project and we felt like a lot of progress was made. And we think that there are 2 possible avenues for continuing this work between Gloucester and the clinic. So our first recommendation would be to essentially take the process that we completed this spring and bring that same process to a broader stakeholder groups. We did make some progress in engaging some new folks, but we think we were still missing a fair amount of young people, young families, and maybe dissenters who are not actually very interested in seeing solar in their communities. And we think that bringing that roundtable format to more stakeholders and trying to meet them where they are would be a good strategy for just broadening the group and broadening the engagement. So that's one recommended path. Another recommended path is to consider narrowing in on a more specific site or use case and consider proposing that to the city. This could be done in conjunction with a certain partner who has interest in developing that or not. And this would require a more detailed analysis of the particular site. And it would require, you know, really kind of someone who would be a partner and an advocate for that site. And that the clinic could do the work of guiding some of the more in-depth discussion around that. And so I think that that would be a recommendation for the community at the point where there really starts to emerge like real interest in one particular site or one particular project. And, you know, when that is the case, that would be a good thing to take that on versus recommendation number one, and broadening is something that could be done, you know, now where the community is now. Jess, does that sound right? Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I feel like you covered it completely. Yeah.
Okay, so that is the end of our presentation. We're not going to do Q&A since this is a recording and we don't have a live audience here, but we want to just thank our partners from the Cape Ann Climate Coalition, particularly Valerie Nelson and Susan Hogue and Marcia Hart. It was a great experience working with you, and we wish all the best for your continued advocacy for renewable energy in Gloucester.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
One second, I think I need to stop. Did I stop the recording? No,
Let's see it on my
it's
end.
right here. There it is.